Welcome back to the HUD, everyone. I'm Zacharoni, and I hope you are safe at home and your hands are washed because I'm about to run down the games I've been playing and what I think of them. Oh yeah, and just for the disclaimer, I did try out Shovel Knight Showdown with my friends, and it definitely worked as a competitive multiplayer. Just thought I might give that quick opinion out of the way. So without further ado, please be seated, and here's what's on my completed menu so far. On November 8, 2019, I started playing Death Stranding, and then on March the 1st, 2020, I beaten the main story. I know the legacy of Hideo Kojima, the creator of the Metal Gear series that I only played a little of the first Metal Gear Solid, so I was curious about his next project, Death Stranding, since his departure from Konami. But when I started playing it, I found out that this was a delivery service game where I take packages to bunkers and then I was rated on the condition of the package. This is probably the reason why the game had been given mixed opinions from different websites, mainly IGN, where Tristan Ogungi, sorry I couldn't pronounce that last name right, gave it a 6.8 out of 10, claiming it the ultimate walking simulator, and a lot of people don't like those type of games really. As for me though, well, I actually enjoyed it. It's quite addicting delivering cargoes to new locations, but the real challenge comes from taking the right amount of tools to use on your journey so that Postman Sam can get through some of the more tougher obstacles in his path. Plus, having the game online makes things a whole lot more easy, especially when a player lifts a vehicle for me to complete deliveries more smoothly, and connecting other holographic zip lines that makes traveling more faster. But the one thing I could do without is the main story. It's not bad, there are some WTF moments that got my head scratching, but with the game and a delivery simulator, it seems unnecessary, because I can just make my own story on how I managed to get my way through a snowy mountain with 111 kilos of cargo, while avoiding BTs that can damage it. Oh, and cutscenes can take around 30 minutes or less, which nearly turned me off if it wasn't for the fact that I want to see what new faces I run into. Like Heartman, who constantly has his heart stop after 20 minutes of breathing. Other nitpicks I have include human enemies can be taken down quite easily without any strategy, inventory can be a bit finicky where I need to do multiple button presses to bring out or put away, and boss fights are a joke, especially one fight against a giant wolf BT where I just hid back in the base and just pop out again without the worrying of it trying to kill me. But the crystals I get from defeating them are worth it, especially when crafting tools to take on my travels. As for the final slice, well, it started up pretty epic, where I need to get to the location where the game started, with less equipment that ends with a boss fight. But the ending was so long that it was trying so hard to explain everything that wasn't even mentioned in the main story, that lasted for 2 hours that just make me want to say, just end for crying out loud! Even if the special song and shocking truth about a certain character were memorable. So yeah, Death Stranding may not be for everyone with its constant walking and overwhelming cutscenes, but in the end, I gave it a chance and I was impressed on Kojima's next game. Now the next thing to do is to play all of Kojima's previous games and compare them to this one. If I have the time for them, of course. On December 26, 2019, I started playing Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair, and then on January 9, 2020, I beaten all the levels but not the Impossible Lair. Yet. Like I said at the end of my first completed menu video, I got Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair for Christmas, and to be honest, I haven't played the first Yooka-Laylee really. So this one was a last minute pick because it's got surprisingly good reviews from critics, saying it's a worthy successor to the Donkey Kong Country series on the SNES, given that some of the people actually worked on it. Then after playing it, I understand why. Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair is an enjoyable platformer with great controls, a soundtrack composed by David Wise and Grant Copehope, and the creative level designs. In fact, it gets more creative in the main free-roaming hub, where you can alter the levels by messing around with the environment. Like you flip a book upside down, then the level you enter is upside down. and at the end of each level, I was given a bead to use in the main level titled The Impossible Lair, a longer and tougher stage that doesn't have any checkpoints, and I can't use any tonics that I found to change the game's looks and difficulty. Also, they took a page from Breath of the Wild where I can go to the final level straight away, but given that the level was named after the title of this game, I didn't last that long on my first playthrough. Luckily though, the beads I rescue in each level will take the hits for me, so that gave me a chance to beat the Impossible Lair. However, I think they missed the point on the Breath of the Wild quick final option because while that game was a fight against the main villain where you can weaken it by doing certain conditions, this one is just an entire level that I have to memorize to finish it. I mean, I can accept the game like Super Meat Boy and Celeste for that, but without any checkpoints and only 48 beads to find, it's hard for me to go back to the Impossible Lair, making this feel like an after-game content rather than a proper final slice really. So overall, Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair is still a solid good platformer, just without the Impossible Lair in the title. Maybe it should have been a Coliseum rather than a lair really. In fact, that's an idea for the future. The Impossible Coliseum. But I doubt Playtonic is watching this really. On January 11th, 2020, I started playing Grease, and then on January 14th, 2020, I finished it. When the nominees were announced at the Game Awards 2019, I started showing it to Storgero to see if he agreed with the nominations that had been chosen, and boy, did we have a good time with that, let me tell you. But the one game that was nominated for Art Direction, Indie Game, and Games for Impact got him hyped because it's a one-of-a-kind game involving the 5 symbols of grief that he recommended to me. And after finishing it, I understand why. Grease is a gorgeous-looking game with fluid hand-drawn animations that describe the 5 symbols of grief with the environments and mechanics, like strong winds that push me back, branches that disappeared underneath me, and underwater sections that are spectacular to look at. Although, after playing it, I still didn't know which moment represents the symbols of grief, but luckily, I found a video by Graveyard Media that explained the symbols of Grease while comparing it to another title that I played before called Y2K, or Yick as they like to call it. Also, I didn't like Y2K as well, and I probably regret what I said about the story in my second helpings video really. Anyway, while Grease may not be challenging, given that this is a game away from frustration or death, I still like Grease. It's like playing a living museum that comes to life, that always holds your hand and make you feel better after a rough day of stress and burnout. On January 17th, 2020, I started playing Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, and then on February 11th, 2020, I gave up on it. Now I did watch Dragon Ball Z on Cartoon Network when I was little, but I'm not a huge fan of it, mainly because I have a few problems with that series. 1. There are so many neck times on Dragon Ball Z moments where it takes more than 6 episodes to finish a fight, and 2. It's constantly moved channels. I mean, does anybody remember CNX by any chance? Luckily though, I managed to know my knowledge of the Dragon Ball series from a few retrospectives and death battle videos, so I was ready for CyberConnect's 2 take on the new Dragon Ball game that they were working on. But while Kakarot does a good job of retelling the story with impressive cinematics and a world that captures the heart of the Dragon Ball universe, it stumbles on its gameplay and side activities. So the one element that Dragon Ball Z is known for are the fights, and Kakarot's combat sort of plays like a fighting game where I can chain attacks with super attacks. It's simple to play and easy to master, resulting in some crazy combinations, but then the fights start to get boring no matter how close my power level is to the enemy's level. Also, while exploring the world is a breath of fresh air because you can fly around at full speed, doing side missions are also boring to play because they involve defeating enemies and finding a particular item that the mission giver wanted. In fact, there was this one side mission where I had to find a particular item in the marked area, but it was so hard to find and I couldn't even recognize it. Probably took me around 15 minutes really. So yeah, I gave up on this one because of how repetitive the combat and side missions were, which is a real shame really because the story, visuals, and epic fights against well-known villains gave me a reason to play. But in the end, it's just not worth it for me, and I think I'd rather watch those epic fights of the show itself on the internet. Yeah right, I'm not watching all 291 episodes mate, I got games to cover right now, so let's move on, shall we? On January 29th, 2020, I started playing the Pedestrian, and then on February 8th, 2020, I beaten it. While I was exploring the internet to find new interesting games to talk about, I suddenly found a channel called Get Indie Gaming, where they do a list of the games that haven't got any attention on Wikipedia, and this was number 1 on their indie games to come out in January. So I decided to give this one a look since I like puzzle platformers like Brave and The Swapper. And while it's not quite as memorable as those titles, it's definitely a good one with a 2D connected puzzle set in a 3D city that changes locations wherever you go. In fact, I had to stop and examine each situation to figure out the best solution. And once I figured it out, I was satisfied with my accomplishment. And with new tricks introduced as I progressed through the game, it didn't get old for me. However, without spoiling too much, the final slice was disappointing, where it presented itself with a new perspective, only for the game to end after that puzzle was finished, making it feel like a missed opportunity to expand it a bit more. But despite that, and its short 4-hour playtime, the Pedestrian is still a great brain exercise puzzle game involving moving street signs while listening to a jazzy piano soundtrack that kept me focused without feeling distracted. On February 2nd, 2020, I tried Bailup out and beaten Classic Mode in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Now I count the number of characters from separate franchises in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate that include Echo Fighters, and so far, Mario is first place, second is Pokemon, if you count Pokemon Trainer as one character of 3, and third place is Fire Emblem. That is until Bailup from Fire Emblem Three Houses shows up, making the Fire Emblem franchise tied in second place with the most characters in the game. Oh, and the third place goes to Zelda with 6 characters so far. So Bailup is the final character in the first Fighter Pass, and while he, or she, depending on who you pick, had an interesting playstyle with its weapon triangle system for each attack, I didn't find Bailup quite enjoyable as the other fighters like Joker or Terry. Mainly because they have gimmicks like special meters, while Bailup is just a standard fighter that should have been in the game from the start, even though Three Houses was released after Smash Bros. Ultimate. The same can be said for the stage that comes with the fighter. It looks impressive, and fans will recognize the characters in the background, but there's nothing exciting about it really. But I did like Bailup's classic structure where you face every Fire Emblem character in chronological release, and they all join you for a final battle where they get brushed off instantly. So yeah, Bailup may be fun to play, but I don't think I'll use him or her as much anytime soon really. Let's hope the next Fighter Pass will live up with new and maybe surprising characters that we didn't see coming, just like this one. Huh. I wonder how that's gonna work since one of them is actually an assist trophy. On February 19th, 2020, I started playing Axial Verge, and then on March 8th, 2020, I beaten the main story, with only 66% of items collected and 92% of the map discovered. Starting off as an engineer for titles like NFL Street and the Tiger Woods PGA Tour Series, Tom Hype secretly worked on a Metroid fan game project called Orin. It's pronounced O-R-N, okay? Which he began in 2010 and then it was released in 2015 for the PS4. From the pixel art, music, and level design, Tom did everything to make his dream game project come to life, and after playing it from start to finish, it proved how much work and heart he put into Axial Verge. Axial Verge is a great Metroidvania with tight controls that constantly reward me with new toys to play with to discover certain areas I couldn't access for the first time. And when I mean toys, I mean gadgets, like a little drone that I can use to go into small spaces, and weapons, like a short-range energy shotgun and a lightning bolt that attach to enemies. Plus, the boss fights are well put together, like Yuriko, the logic in the game that requires me to find and shoot his individual weak spots. As for the final slice/boss, well, it may be chaotic and its random chances of health pickups can be irritating at times, but in the end, it was satisfying to take down, even if I didn't care much about the main story. My only downside is that there's no fast travel in the game, which would come in handy to speed the pacing up, but with its sequel coming out soon, I'm sure Tommy has got it on his list of improvements for Axial Verge 2. No pressure, by the way, Tom. On March 11th, 2020, I started playing Ori and the Will of the Wisps, and then on March 18th, 2020, I beaten the main story with only 92% of the game completed. When I first saw the trailer for Ori and the Will of the Wisps at E3 2017, I nearly became an emotional waterfall when I witnessed Ori comforting Ku when she saw her entire race wiped out. Then in 2018, I played Ori and the Blind Forest to get myself ready for the sequel, and after playing it, I felt like that game should have done more really. And after playing Ori and the Will of the Wisps, my prayers were answered. Ori and the Will of the Wisps is the near-perfect sequel with the same tight controls, interesting dungeon designs like Barrel's Reach where the platform become my dangerous adversary, and combat which is surprisingly enjoyable. Especially against the bosses, like this giant spider with glowing intimidating eyes that would make anyone with arachnophobia cower in fear. Plus, it's also rewarding to play when I keep exploring the world and its hidden objects that are put in challenging sections that required me to be creative with my platforming skills. As for the story, well, it's definitely better than the first one because, without spoiling anything, there was this one moment in the first game where it should have been sold in the final slice then halfway to the final slice, if you know what I mean. And when I got to the final slice in this, it makes sense because Ori saved the character's life, but at a cost of a difficult choice she made that was quite sad really. So after saying that, I found Ori and the Will of the Wisps a huge improvement over the Blind Forest with its gameplay, dungeon design and story. And after seeing the ending, I'm wondering where Moon Studio will go next in the future. On March 20th, 2020, hey that rhymes for some reason, I started playing Doom Eternal, and then on March 27th, 2020, I beaten the main story. Now admittedly, I was a little worried about Doom Eternal because its publisher, Bethesda, was stepping in a few puddles lately, like Fallout 76, The Elder Scrolls Blades, and Wolfenstein Youngblood. But when I started playing it, it was all forgiven, because the game feels like a mental adrenaline rush where combat is fast, exciting, and over the top, with my bread and butter being the super shotgun with the new hookshot attachment. Although, I was a little disappointed that the pistol was removed from the game, given that it was helpful against zombies to save ammunition. But luckily, the chainsaw was the real saving grace that had a regenerated meter when used, so I can refill my weapon's ammunition, which is all backed up by Nick Gordon's heavy metal soundtrack that is still phenomenal to listen to while playing. So yeah, Doom Eternal is great, and probably are my best games of this year. But do I think it's better than Doom 2016? Well, no really. Because while Doom 2016 was a back-to-basics shooter from the grounds up, this one almost seems like it's trying too hard to be the most metal Doom game in the series, and they do this by filling it with overwhelming odds, even if it's actually enjoyable. Also, secrets are too easy to find later on, where they are shown on the map, and some of the bosses didn't really attach to me. Like there's the Marauder, which you need to wait patiently for his eyes to change green, while the Archfire was the most annoying enemy in the game that keeps summoning enemies and increase their attack and speed. As for the final slice, well, taking down the final boss was satisfying, but fighting it was a pain, because I had to take out its exposed parts while dealing with the hordes of hell that keep getting me around every corner, even if they were the only way to refill my weaponry. Although, don't get me wrong, I love Doom Eternal with its fast-paced action, but I think Doom 2016 was memorable because it took us by surprise, while Eternal meets our expectations. Now let's just hope they don't screw up the next one in the future, because we all know what Machine Games did with their last Wolfenstein game, and I'm hoping it will make the same mistake as well. And what that did I hear? What about the multiplayer? Well, I only played a little of it, and I am doing a top-ins video on it right now, but I'll give you a teaser opinion to keep you waiting. If Doom Eternal's multiplayer feels like Nightmare mode, and that's pretty much it really. Also, I'm still playing Half-Life, which I should have completed a while ago, but there were other games like Ori and Eternal that I was spending the most time with. So check back with me later and I'll tell you what I think of Half-Life, Doom Eternal's multiplayer, and all the other games I've been playing in the future. And if you like what you see, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Plus, stay in touch with my Twitter page, link in description down below. But until then, I'm Zacharoni. Enjoy your pizza, and I'll see you next time.